For the past few months, something has been trying to get invited into my house. I'll never forget the day it started. I was going to university, but that came to an abrupt end when my father passed away during finals week from complications due to COVID-19. It had taken a lot of thought and prayer to even decide to go to college because my mom had died a few years earlier. The school I was going to attend was out of state, and I didn't want to leave my dad all alone in our home. The only reason I felt comfortable with going was because two of my friends, Bryce and Will, were willing to move in with my dad while I was gone. For that, I'll always be in their debt. Long story short, I blew all my saved up money that was meant for college on legal and funeral fees. I have 3 older half-brothers from my father's first marriage to split belongings between. In the end, I was left with 10 grand of my mom's life insurance and from my dad's savings and a little cabin in the UP. The cabin was in the middle of Nowheresville off of an unnamed road 45 minutes from the nearest town. The only sign of civilization within a 20-minute drive was a bait and tackle shop that doubles as a liquor store. The driveway to the cabin was impossible to see unless you knew where it was in the thick brush. The driveway was made up of nothing but ruts and tree roots that took 15 minutes to drive down. The cabin itself was only about 900 square feet. There was a kitchen that doubled as a dining room with a wood-burning stove, a living room with a couch and an old fireplace, and a bedroom with a quadruple bunk bed with all full-sized mattresses. The whole place probably only took 5 decent steps to get from room to room. The sink had an old-fashioned hand pump to get water from the river. The only bathroom was an outhouse in Mother Nature. There was a gas stove for cooking, a refrigerator that looked like it was bought in the 80s, and a single gas-powered light by the front door. Although the cabin was wired for electricity, the only way to power them was by generator. So I knew on my tight budget I wouldn't be running that very often. After the nearly 10-hour drive with my 13-year-old Labrador Ella to get there, and missing the driveway 10 times, I managed to get my '98 Cavalier down the driveway. I looked down at my radio and saw that the time was 10:23 p.m. It was the middle of May. My girlfriend Christine had freshly broken up with me because I'd taken up a drinking habit to fill the chasm that was left behind, and she didn't want to deal with an alcoholic boyfriend. I can't blame her. I chose the bottle instead of healing. It also didn't help that she was going to college 1,035 miles and a 15-hour drive away. And now Ella and I were completely and utterly alone. Sure, Will and Bryce offered to live with me like they had my father, but I didn't want them to completely uproot their lives. Bryce was just made plant manager at a small trailer hitch manufacturer, and Will was engaged. I wanted to be alone anyways. I was in a pretty dark place. I unloaded my car, let my dog Ella run to the trees to answer the call of nature, tested the gas lines, and made my bed. I checked my phone to see the time, 10:52, and went back out to my car to leave my phone plugged in out there overnight instead of running the generator all night. Outside, the world was still. The wind that made the pines sway had died. The river snaked through the woods without even a trickle. The animals were silent. I felt as if I were in a crypt. I was almost hoping to hear some coyotes in the distance, or the snapping of a twig under a raccoon. Anything but this Stygian silent stillness. Even my overly brave for her breed dog was silent and stiff as a corpse. We went back inside. I locked both of the doors and covered all the windows. I even closed the chimney vents. I didn't know why, but I felt the need to ensure that there were no access points in the cabin. By the time I rolled into bed with my bottle of Jimmy, the battery alarm clock glowed 11:11. No sooner than when I cracked the seal on my dinner, I heard a gentle tap, tap, tap on the window nearest my bed. I froze. Ella held her breath. I waited. Tap, tap, tap. I hoped it was a tree branch. I prayed it was nothing. Tap, tap, tap. Only this time it was on the living room window. This continued until whoever, or whatever had found the front door. Thump, thump, thump. The doorknob started shaking. The screen door opened and slammed over and over. I'd watched enough Wendigoon videos to know better than to get up out of my bed. I made a mental note that I was going to get my hands on a firearm the next day. There was no way some Youper tweaker was going to kill me. The clouds parted, and the silver gleam of the full moon was breaking through the trees. And I saw it. Through the bedsheet I'd used to cover the kitchen window, I saw the shadow of the knocker. I saw antlers. Like a deer was on its hind legs, trying to get a better view. Then I heard it. Like a man who'd spent his whole life smoking Marlboro Reds. Hello? I started crying, wishing my dad were with me. I knew he wouldn't be able to do anything, but I needed my dad. This went on until 12:11 a.m. Exactly 1 hour. Then as suddenly as it started, it stopped. I stayed in my sleeping bag, frozen with fright. At 2 a.m., I slunk out of my bag and tiptoed to the silverware drawer. It creaked and groaned as I opened it up. The sound made me want to throw up. I slid an 8-inch chef's knife out and carried it back to bed with me. I knew in my racing heart that this wouldn't do anything to protect me, but it gave me just enough comfort to stop sobbing. It did not give me the courage to sleep, however. The next morning, Ella and I got in the car and took the 45-minute drive to town. I got the necessities: 6 sheets of 1-inch plywood, a few 2x4s, nails, a week's worth of Jackie D's, canned goods, dog food, and 4 deadbolt locks for each door. Funnily enough, this hardware store also had a firearms section, so I picked up an over and under 20 gauge and the ammo to match. The bored girl behind the register rang up my items for me. I decided to casually spark up a conversation. Me, there ever been any strange happenings in the location where I now live? Her, not really. Just your odd huntin' or snowmobilin' accidents. Me, interesting. Any cabin break-ins? Her stopping the ring up. A few? Why ya skin? I decided that was the end of our conversation. Didn't want her to think the new guy was some kind of alcoholic grifting burglar. On the drive back to the cabin, I saw a truck pull into a hidden driveway like mine on my road. He got out and flagged me down. I got out and he started talking to me. Him, you new round here? Me, yeah. Just moved into the cabin up the way last night. He stared at me. Not in an intimidating way, more of a you'll not do well here kind of way. He looked at me as if he was trying to decide what kind of flower arrangements he'd make for my funeral. Him, name's Jim. And you? Me, Ben. Jim, don't go outside past 11 p.m. Ben. The beast won't like it. I spent the rest of the day boarding up my windows. The only window that wasn't sealed by plywood was the window over the sink. I still boarded it up, but I used the 2x4s as makeshift bars. Everything was made as secure as I could. Jim even dropped by to help me get my 420 pounds propane tank refilled in town. That night, after feeding Ella, having a dinner that consisted of canned stew and half a bottle of Jack, I made sure that both of the doors were all deadbolt. All the boards were secure. Ella and I had both gone outside. And when 11:11 rolled around, it started again. Tap, tap, tap. The tapping started on the exterior wall of the cabin directly next to my head. The buzz of the booze instantly wore off. The temperature in the room plummeted. Ella was shaking, hiding under the blanket. Then I heard it. Hello? Hello, Al? Ben? Let me in. Ben. Please? It's so dark out here. It knows my name. This time it was at the barred window. Why did you board up the windows? I saw you do it. At the back door. Rattle, rattle, rattle. Thud, thud, thud. That's when it hit me. The stench. It smelled like body odor and rancid hamburger. The whole cabin was permeated in the foul reek of rot. It was so putrid that I could feel my Jack making a return trip up my gullet. Ella was dry heaving and pawing at her nose. After one last slam on the front door, I heard it leave. The clock read 12:11 a.m. The smell lingered for about an hour afterwards. Once I knew the smell had completely vacated the premises, I managed to get a few measly hours of sleep. The next morning, I hauled tail over to Jim to inquire about the beast. He was only a few minutes up the road. Jim lived in a single-room A-frame. It didn't have any windows. The first point of access was the front door, which was solid steel with deadbolts, 2 drop-down bars, slide locks, and even a few chain locks for safe measure. The second entry point was the chimney, which was equipped with a fairly sophisticated locking vent. Inside there was a bed, a table, a fridge, and a gas stove. Unlike my outhouse, he had a hand-dug pit toilet that smelled like it hadn't been emptied in a hot minute. Jim, he came again, didn't he? Me, yeah, he did. Jim, what did he say? Me, he knew my name. Jim, who have you told your name to? Me, no one. Just you and the cashier at name of store. Jim, this isn't good, Ben. The beast has learned about you. He's searching you. He knows you're vulnerable. This nightly routine went on for months. Every night, the beast would torment me. 1 hour. Every night. Like clockwork. It was November. I'd replaced all the 2x4s with rebar, and the bed sheets on the windows with blackout curtains. I'd even gotten myself a part-time job at the paper factory in town. Pay was garbage, but it kept Ella and I fed, the propane tank full, and the guns loaded. Over these months, Jim had become my only friend. He'd gifted me a handgun to keep on my person at all times. He said he wouldn't miss it, and I believed him. He had an arsenal that I'm sure would have had him on the ATF's watch list if we hadn't lived at the intersection of Bumfuck and Deliverance, which was prime hunting grounds. I'd even traded in the over and under for a pump-action 20-gauge with a 6-shot capacity. The forest gave me fresh meat at least. The river gave me fish. Mother Nature had fully adopted me and had been a very generous matriarch. I know what you're thinking. Why would you stay there? And my answer is, I had nowhere to go. I was completely disowned by my family. The family that hadn't disowned me were dead, and as of now, my routine was completely safe. Jim had informed me that the beast, according to everything he'd learned, could only enter via an open or unlocked door/window. The beast followed very strict rules. It was Thanksgiving. The forest was completely blanketed in snow, and it was already dark by 4 p.m. The cashier who'd rung me up all those months ago was now kind of my girlfriend. Her name's Connie, by the way, and she'd invited me and Ella over to her and her parents' house for dinner. I locked up the cabin and made sure the gas light was turned off before I left. My '98 Cavalier had seen better days. The radio no longer worked, so I chose to sing Christmas songs to Ella the whole way to Connie's. I'd brought a venison loin from the doe I'd taken earlier that week and a few pike fillets. Connie had made sweet potato pie, corn casserole, and something she called chicken dish. Connie, why don't you ever take me to your place? Me, you don't want to. The only toilet is an outhouse and the hand pump is frozen up. I hadn't told her about the beast. I didn't want to scare her away by making her think I was some kind of alcoholic schizophrenic. Jim had made me promise to never bring anyone to the cabin. It wasn't safe. Connie, I don't mind. Besides, I can't make you thankful while my parents are in the other room. That was it. I'm a weak man. I'd agreed that she could come out for the night. As long as I went through my routine, everything would be fine. My surviving since May was proof of that, right? We drove deeper and deeper into the still forest. The snow was deep and slick, so I took my time driving towards the cabin. I kept checking my phone to see the time. It was getting dangerously close to the hour of the beast. I decided to slow down and, accidentally, take a wrong turn. I'd successfully managed to keep us away from the cabin for the full hour of the beast. I was feeling pretty good about myself until I pulled up to the cabin. The door was wide open. Through the vents of my car, we could smell the rot. The beast was in my cabin. My heart was pounding. I locked the door. I knew I had. I always lock the door. When I looked in my rearview mirror, I watched as a large pine tree fell across the driveway with a groan, cracking, and a teeth-shaking crash. Then Connie spoke as if she were trying not to breathe. Connie, Ben, something's very wrong here. Me, stay here. I'm gonna check it out. I didn't want to check it out. I was certain that this was my end. Poetic, really. Just as my life began to smooth out, I was going to be finished off by some nightmare. I thought about calling Jim, but he would be asleep by now, and he wouldn't be able to get down my driveway. I was going to have to do this alone. I grabbed my flashlight from the glove box, got out, and started sneaking up to the door of the cabin. The clouds had ceased the snowing as if in anticipation. The icy wind bit at my face. The clod leached its way into my bones. Then I heard the ear-ringing sound of shattering glass. I turned around with my pistol drawn and I saw him. The beast. He wasn't in the cabin. The beast had broken through the passenger window and was pulling Connie through, slashing her against the jagged glass. Ella had a hold of him by his bicep, but he swatted her away. I heard her neck snap with a schlunk. He looked like a bent and arthritis-stricken man, fully nude, skin glistening in the moonlight. From the armpits up, he looked like a buck suffering from chronic waist disease. Blood and scum and fecal matter was smeared all over his body. He turned to look at me with milky eyes. The beast, Ben. That was all he said. I started firing at him. A few of my bullets actually hit, but I was too late. He was already dragging Connie by the hair into the treeline just out of sight. I heard him killing her. I could hear the blows falling on her body, like a wet sack of potatoes. I heard her call to me. I heard her stop. With one last schlunk, I knew he'd killed her. I went inside. I grabbed my shotgun. I went out to end this. I walked into the treeline. I found the mess. I saw the beast hunched over. He was on all fours, and he burying his face into Connie's now cracked open chest cavity. Connie looked almost as if she were pleading with me. I looked at the beast, but the deer head was laying in the snow. I saw the now unmasked beast. It It was Jim. Jim, the one who had helped me fortify my cabin. The one who had helped install my deadbolts. He must have stolen keys to the cabin at his last visit the day prior. He set this trap. He turned to look at me, tears streaming down his face, trying not to throw up whilst swallowing hunks of Connie. I raised my gun. There would be no tears from me. No sorrow. I was numb from the cold and from my spirit finally being snuffed out. Jim, please, Ben. Please. Kill me.